Hello everyone, welcome to the Wuxia Audiobook. Today, we will continue to the next part of the series Renegade Immortal.
Chapter 11, Jiang Hu. Weasel. Wang Lin was stunned. The first person he thought of that might fit the description was the yellow-cloth disciple that laughed at him. However, he wasn't sure. Did you not see him? He's the man responsible for organizing the work of the disciple. He is also an honorary disciple but has been given right to start his cultivation. Wearing yellow clothes, he doesn't look like a good guy at all. We all call him Weasel. Jiang Hu explained as he drank water. Wang Lin took a bite of a sweet potato, then said, I know who it is, I saw him today. He told me to bring back 10 vats of water a day starting tomorrow or else I won't get any food. Jiang Hu was stunned. After staring at Wang Lin for a bit, he asked, Brother, did you offend him before? Wang Lin shook his head and asked, Why? Jiang Hu showed Wang Lin a pitiful expression. Wang Lin, are you thinking that the vats are like the ones you use at home? Like this big? He gestured with his hands. Wang Lin had a bad feeling and nodded. Jiang Hu had a bitter smile. He said, You must have offended the yellow weasel. The vats he is talking about is the size of this room, filling up 10 vats. Wang Lin, I won't eat these sweet potatoes, you keep them. You'll be lucky to get food every 4 to 5 days. You are new here, and all the foraging spots in the mountain are taken. Only the elder disciples can pick them. Tomorrow, I'll just eat my wild fruits. He placed the remaining sweet potatoes on the table, sighed, laid down on his bed, and fell asleep. Wang Lin felt rage surge through him, but then he thought of his parents' eyes filled with expectations and forced down his rage. He laid down on the bed asleep full of rage. It was still dark on the second day when Wang Lin climbed out of bed. Jiang Hu was still snoring. Wang Lin put on his grey outfit and quickly made his way to the place he had met the weasel. Soon after he arrived, the sun emerged from the east. Yellow-clad youths opened the doors and gave Wang Lin weird looks. At least you are on time. Get a bucket and head out east. There is a spring in the mountain, carry water from there. He paid no more attention to Wang Lin. He sat cross-legged on the ground and breathed slowly while facing the sunrise. A barely visible white mist came from his nose, rolling like 2 dragons. Wang Lin eyed him with envy. He then walked into the room and looked around. Finally, behind a door he saw the 10 vats and let out a bitter smile as he walked toward the east gate. Wang Lin arrived at the location after a long walk. The scenery was quite beautiful and the sound of running water was soothing. It was a place that could soothe the heart. He had no time to appreciate the beauty. When the bucket was full, he picked it up and quickly went back up the mountain. Wang Lin kept doing this until dusk. He hadn't even filled 1 vat yet. If it wasn't for the sweet potatoes filling his stomach, he wouldn't have the strength to continue. His arms and legs were sore and numb. They hurt whenever he moved. Wang Lin pondered a while, then carried away half a bucket of water to a deserted area. He looked around to make sure no one was in the vicinity. He dropped the stone bead into the bucket and sloshed it around a bit. Then he took out the bead and drank the water. He immediately felt a warmth in his stomach, and the muscle pain disappeared. Although the effect was inferior to the dews, Wang Lin was still excited. He touched his chest and adjusted the position of the bead. He decided to not let anyone know of this treasure. After he finished drinking half a bucket of water, his muscles were no longer sore and he felt full of energy. He quickly continued his job of fetching water. That night, he dipped the stone bead in another half bucket of water and drank it. To avoid suspicion, he came back with a weary look on his face. A while later, Jiang Hu came back. He still wore that overworked expression on his face. The two talked for a bit and Jiang Hu hesitantly begged for 2 pieces of sweet potato. He ate them and fell asleep on his bed. Time passed by quickly, and in the blink of an eye, a month had passed since Wang Lin became a Heng Yue sect disciple. Wang Lin found out that Jiang Hu's job was to collect firewood. He must collect enough firewood before he could eat. He had been collecting firewood the entire 3 years since he became an honorary disciple of the Heng Yue sect. 3 years ago, he would only eat once every 3 or 4 days, but now he has shortened it to where he could eat once every 2 days. According to him, The honorary disciples are to do chores for 10 years and be able to eat 3 meals a day before they can learn even the most basic cultivation. The inner disciples are not like them. They have their own master, do not do any chores, and have their own rooms. Their only job is to cultivate. In addition, there is a person in between the inner disciples and the honorary disciples, such as Wang Hao, who became a help, but he's basically a servant. These people do not need to do chores, and also practice some low-level techniques. They only need to complete the work their master assigns them. However, these people possessed very little talent and they would just spend their whole lives being helpers. As for the so-called talent, Wang Lin learned from Jiang Hu that it was simply spiritual energy. Everyone has it, but in varying amounts. If one has enough spiritual energy, they can learn an immortal technique in a year, but if lacking, it would take dozens or even hundreds of years. A man's life is limited. Someone with mediocre talent will never get anywhere in his lifetime. That is why the sect put such large importance on spiritual energy. This month, when Wang Lin was fetching water, he drank a lot of water that the stone bead had been soaked in, causing his body to become much stronger. Before, it would take him 6 days to fill the 10 vats, now it only took 3. However, in order to keep others from being suspicious, Wang Lin always got up before sunrise and leisurely walked toward the mountain with the bucket. While others were surprised he was able to finish within 3 days, they thought it was because he woke up extra early and went to sleep late. Chapter 12, Immortal Talisman. This month, almost all of the honorary disciples came to know Wang Lin. All of them carried arrogant looks on their faces and talked viciously to him. Wang Lin ignored them. He knew that all these honorary disciples' minds were twisted. Before he came, all the honorary disciples were at the bottom. They had nowhere to vent their anger and frustration. However, now that he, who entered the sect by attempting suicide, was here, they viewed him as someone even lower than them and vented by bullying him. He laughed coldly to himself. He knew that this was not something he could do anything about. In the sect, the strong were always right. Some of the honorary disciples had been here for a long time, and their bodies were all very strong. Some had even learned some immortal technique. If he were to fight back, he was bound to lose. However, Wang Lin wasn't a complete pushover. He remembered the faces of all those disciples that looked down upon him and planned to take revenge when he becomes strong enough. With this mindset, he acted like he was blind and deaf, and continued to fetch water every day, while secretly studying the stone bead. He experimented by soaking the beads in various liquids. He tried mixing the dew and dipping the bead in spring water, sweat, and even blood. In the end, he found that the dew was the best by far. But there were different types of dew. The dew that appeared on the bead in the morning was the best, followed by the dew that appeared on the bead at night. If the dew was collected anywhere else, it was not as effective. Next best was when it was mixed with spring water. Blood and sweat were the worst, they had almost no effect at all. In order to not attract any attention, he found some small gourds in the wild and hollowed them to hold some of the dew. He did not carry these gourds with him. Instead, he would hide them separately in remote locations. He would only take them out when he was fetching water and never took them back to the sect. He carried a gourd with him when he worked. Whenever he became tired, he would take a drink and instantly feel refreshed. In addition, Wang Lin found out about a strange phenomenon. Whenever the night or early morning dew appeared on the stone bead, it would look like there were many drops of dew on the bead, but when collecting them, he could only get about 1/10 of that amount. The rest disappeared. As for this strange phenomenon, Wang Lin could only say that the dew was absorbed by the bead. Although his explanation was a bit absurd, he really couldn't think of anything else. Today at dusk, Wang Lin filled the remaining 3 vats and said to the yellow-clothed disciple while he was meditating, "Brother Lu, I'm going to take a trip home so I won't be coming tomorrow." The youth Lu opened his eyes and looked at Wang Lin, then snorted. Wang Lin didn't care. He learned from Jiang Hu that an honorary disciple can return home to visit relatives 3 times a year. All he had to do was ask elder son for permission. Wang Lin remembered that his father's birthday was coming up. No matter what, he must go back. After finishing his chore, he walked toward the elder in charge of the honorary disciples. Hang Yue sect was split into 6 academies that were split into 5 subdivisions. They were metal, wood, water, fire, and earth, each with their own honorary disciples. The inner disciples and elders all lived in the main courtyard. He would often pass by them when he fetched water. He always looked at them with eyes filled with envy. After arriving there, he took a good look around, then yelled, "Honorary disciple Wang Lin requests for elder son." A young man dressed in white casually walked forward. He looked at Wang Lin once and said proudly, "You are Wang Lin?" Seeing the youth dressed in white, Wang Lin's heart tightened as he nodded. He already knew all the Hang Yue sect disciples were ranked by the color they wore. Honorary disciples were divided into gray and yellow. The yellows were given the right to start cultivating immortal technique. Inner disciples were ranked based on their strength. From high to low are purple, black, white and red. The youth in white's mouth twitched and he gave Wang Lin a cold look before turning around and walking back into the courtyard. Wang Lin followed behind him with a deadpan face. After walking through the courtyard for a while, he arrived at a house surrounded by flowers. The youth in white lazily said, "Teacher son, an honorary disciple is here to see you." After he finished speaking, he stood off to the side. A hoarse voice came from the garden. "You may leave, honorary disciple, come in." The youth in white chuckled and left. Wang Lin was very nervous inside. He pushed open the gate to the garden. The moment he entered the garden, he was hit by the aroma of various medicines. He turned around and looked at the gate, wondering why he couldn't smell it outside. A voice with discontent came from a corner room in the garden saying, "What are you doing standing there? Hurry up and say your name." Wang Lin quickly said, "Disciple Wang Lin here to meet elder son. My dad's birthday is tomorrow, this disciple wishes to return home for a visit." The voice scolded, "You are Wang Lin? So it was you? Humph, a person training to be an immortal caring about worldly affairs? In your lifetime, you will never become an immortal." Wang Lin frowned and couldn't help but say, "Disciple hasn't even cultivated any immortal technique, how could disciple be on the path to an immortal?" The elder paused for a while and impatiently said, "You have 3 days, so return quickly. This is an 1000-mile immortal talisman that can be used twice. It will increase your speed greatly." Then, an ordinary-looking piece of dull yellow paper floated out from the window and landed next to Wang Lin. Wang Lin picked up the immortal talisman. He knew from Jiang Hu that all the disciples that visit home receive this. The goal of the sect was very simple, show off the sect's immortal technique and treasures to attract more youths to apply. This immortal talisman was in fact of very poor quality, however, the upside was that it was very easy to use. All you had to do was stick it on your leg. For normal people, it increased their speed. However, there were many honorary disciples that collected them because they heard they could be traded for other things in the outside world. Many disciples used the excuse of going back home just to collect the talismans. After walking out of the courtyard, Wang Lin headed back to his room. After saying goodbye to Jiang Hu, he started to descend from the mountain. At this time, the stars were shining in the sky. Wang Lin wanted to head home tomorrow, but he didn't want to use the talisman and was afraid he'd miss his dad's birthday, so he headed out at night. Shortly after Wang Lin left, elder son came out from his room to gather some herbs, but was abruptly stunned. He stared at the gate entrance. All the blue grass that had been growing there had withered. Chapter 13, The Elder. He walked closer. Under careful inspection, he noticed that even the purple flowers across from the blue grass had withered, but not as badly as the blue grass. He clearly remembered that the herbs were still healthy and strong at noon. How could they become like this in just one afternoon? He picked up the blue grass and inspected it. From the look of the blue grass, it seemed to have lost all its moisture, causing it to wilt. He touched the ground, but the ground was at the correct moisture for growing herbs. He was very confused. After a while, he suddenly thought, this afternoon only one person visited me. However, he is only an honorary disciple, how could he cause the herbs to wither? Thinking about it, he decided to look into this matter. Without saying a word, he flicked his sleeves and his body started flying. Shortly after, he arrived at the place honorary disciples got their work assigned. Elder son shouted in a deep voice, "Which disciple here is in charge?" The voice was like thunder. The yellow-clothed disciple that was in charge quickly came over and kneeled on the ground, kowtowing non-stop. Elder son impatiently said, "Do you have Wang Lin's registration?" Disciple Lu's heart skipped a beat. He would never have thought that such a high-ranking elder would ever come asking about that piece of trash, Wang Lin. He thought of the times he bullied Wang Lin and his face paled. This disciple has Brother Wang Lin's registration. Brother Wang loves to learn and is always serious with this work. This disciple has always looked to him as a role model. The elder son didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but in his heart he knew that this was good. The more nervous someone was when they talked to him meant the more they respected him. The title elder is in fact a really worthless title in the Heng Yue sect. Almost all second-generation disciples are called elder by the honorary disciples, but all the inner disciples call him uncle master. Although he was respected in the eyes of the honorary disciples, he didn't have power in the second generation. Even the third generation didn't respect him much. Else he wouldn't be assigned the pointless job of managing the requests of honorary disciples wishing to visit home. Elder son asked, "Which yard does Wang Lin live in?" At the Northern Earth Division's yard. Without waiting for him to finish, elder son flew away on a rainbow toward the north and disappeared in a blink of an eye. Disciple Lu became even more nervous. His intestine almost turned green. He vowed that when he saw Wang Lin again, he must not ridicule him, but instead praise him, treat him like his own grandfather. After all, he was something an elder personally asked about. Elder son arrived at the Earth Division's yard and didn't see Wang Lin. He went to the registry to find Wang Lin's room number, then arrived at Wang Lin's room. Jiang Hu was still sleeping. He was snoring loudly and didn't even realize elder son was there. Elder son carefully examined the room. He frowned and muttered, "He left very quickly. I'll inspect him once he is back." Wang Lin was walking in the mountain with the talisman on his leg. The talisman was really amazing. After putting it on his leg, he felt a stream of warmth fill his body. Gathered at his feet were dazzling white light, making him look like an immortal. When all the creatures in the mountain saw the white light, they all stayed away. None dared to come close. The fresh mountain air blew at Wang Lin's face. He was in a good mood as he quickly went home following the route from his memory. One night had passed, and it was the dawn of the next day. He took a mouthful of water from the gourd and was filled with energy again. He noticed he had already left the mountain. Once he reached the village, he would just have to follow the little road back home. Without stopping, he rapidly went forward. He entered a town when the sun was bright and the crowd was hustling and bustling. Wang Lin went around for a bit, buying gifts for his parents, then quickly left. When it was late, Wang Lin finally reached the village. He saw from afar a red flag with the word "Life" on it in front of his house. Outside, there were many wagons. There was a bustling crowd. Wang Lin was stunned as he arrived at the front of his house. His arrival was too flashy. His relatives, who were here for his father's birthday, only saw a flash of white light as Wang Lin appeared. Everyone had a look of envy as they started their praises. Second brother, Wang Lin came back. "Just look at how handsome this kid is. He looks just like an immortal. Isn't it just so?" Even the immortals messed up and ended up regretting their decision and took Wang Lin as their disciple. In the future, our Wang family will depend on these 3 children. It was due to my old eyes that I wasn't able to see this kid's good points, but looking at him now, what part of him can't compare to Wang Chuo and Wang Hao? Clearly a dragon amongst men. Good, 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 exclaimed Wang family's third eldest uncle, as if he forgot all the vile things he had said before. This kid, Wang Lin, has always been smart since he was a kid. I have to say, even the immortals made a mistake last time, so how could us mortals not make a mistake? Wang Lin, I hope you don't hate your 5th uncle. Your 5th uncle apologizes to you. All the relatives changed their expressions and revealed kind and smiling faces. Wang Lin coldly snorted to himself. At that moment, his father appeared and was surprised as he pulled Wang Lin's arm. "Taizhu, why did you come back? Didn't I tell you to stay at the Heng Yue sect? Don't always worry about home." Wang Lin looked at his dad and saw his dad's wrinkles had lessened a lot. He was obviously very happy these days. "Dad, don't you worry. All the disciples of the sect have 3 chances to visit home a year. Once your birthday is over, I'll quickly head back. Wang Lin's dad proudly looked at the relatives around him and pulled Wang Lin to the door yelling, "Wife, look who is back." Wang Lin's mother was surrounded by a group of female relatives. When she heard her husband's voice, she looked toward him and was surprised to see Wang Lin. She rushed over and started asking about how he had been. Chapter 14, Unexpected Transformation. Wang Lin felt warmth in his heart. For the past month, he had to get used to people deriding him. Now that he was back home, he felt the warmth of his parents. Second brother, Wang Lin is really an immortal disciple. Your sixth brother is blind and said a few harsh words. I hope brother won't take it too serious. You know me, I have a sharp tongue, but a soft heart. It was all for Wang Lin's own good. Second sister-in-law, when I told my daughter that I didn't betroth her, she panicked and said that she absolutely must marry your family's Taiju. Let us settle this marriage. Lao, your fifth uncle is old. In the future, the Wang family will depend on you guys. Your fifth uncle has always had an eye for your son. In my eyes, he is even more promising than your older brother's son. Wang Lin's parents' faces were glowing. After the birthday party started, all the relatives praised Wang Lin non-stop. Even a few who drank too much started causing a ruckus about banding together to get back the inheritance Wang Lin's father deserved. Wang Lin's father only smiled, not taking it seriously. He knew far too well how these relatives were. Wang Lin's father no longer cared about the things of the past. He just wanted Wang Lin to become better and better, nothing else. After a lively day, when it was dusk, all of the relatives left. Wang Lin was looking at the gifts in the yard. His heart filled with emotion. He remembered reading from a book saying when one achieves success, those around him benefit as well. He finally understood those words. That night, Wang Lin's parents asked him how his life at the sect was. Seeing the anticipation in his parents' eyes, he lied to them for the first time. He described to them how popular he was, and how he practiced immortal techniques. His parents listened in awe. For his parents, no matter how harsh being an honorary disciple was, no matter how much people ridiculed him, he would endure it, because ever since he was little, he had never seen them this happy. It's only 10 years, I'll endure. Wang Lin secretly decided in his heart. Wang Lin stayed at home and spent time with his parents for 2 days. On the third day, his parents and everyone in the village sent him off. He put the immortal talisman on his leg and left. Even when he was far away, he could hear the voices of the villagers. It was getting dark. The sky filled with dark clouds. There was thunder in the sky, and the high humidity caused mist to appear. Wang Lin couldn't help but speed up. He arrived at the Heng Yue sect at midnight, then went to lay in his bed. Jiang Hu was still snoring. Wang Lin tossed and turned, but couldn't fall asleep. In the middle of the night, thunder roared outside and a flash of lightning lit up the room. Wang Lin touched the bead next to his chest. When he went home, he had his mum make an inner pocket in his shirt. Wang Lin took out the stone bead and studied it in the light from the oil lamp. He rubbed his eyes as he took a close look at the cloud patterns on the bead. This isn't right. I remember that last time there were 5 clouds, but now there are 6. Wang Lin was surprised. He sat up and counted. Indeed, there were 6 clouds. He was very surprised and couldn't think of a reason. This increased his curiosity toward the stone bead. He put it back in his pocket, turned off the oil lamp, and went to sleep. Outside, the wind was howling, thunder was roaring, lightning was striking, and rain was pouring from the sky. The rain slammed against the window. Wang Lin was suddenly awakened by a burst of cold air. He opened his eyes and was dumbfounded. The continuous lightning lit up the room. The room was full of thick mist. The table, ground, and even the beds were wet. However, except for a damp spot where he stored the bead, Wang Lin was completely dry. He looked at Jiang Hu and saw that his body was surrounded by a white mist. His were clothes wet, his body was covered in frost, and his teeth were clenched shut. Jiang Hu! Jiang Hu! Wang Lin was surprised and quickly got up and shook Jiang Hu. However, Jiang Hu showed no sign of waking up, and his breath was weak. Wang Lin was very anxious. He was about to head out to look for other disciples for help, when he suddenly stopped and touched his clothes. A doubt raised in his mind. Why is it that even though we are in the same room, and both beds are soaked, every part of my body, except for this damp spot, is dry? Wang Lin pondered, then suddenly took out the stone bead from his breast pocket. At that moment, all of the water droplets trembled and slowly began to float. Even the white mist on Jiang Hu started to form water droplets. Lightning flashed again and Wang Lin noticed that all the water droplets looked like crystals and charged toward the stone bead in his hand. Wang Lin quickly threw the stone bead and dropped to the floor to avoid the water droplets. The mysterious bead fell in an arc and rolled to the corner after it hit the ground. All the water droplets quickly shot toward the bead and disappeared into it. A moment later, all the water in the room disappeared. Even the beds were now dry. Jiang Hu's breathing returned to normal. After a long time, the thunderstorm still raged outside, but the sky was no longer pitch black, and rays of moonlight broke through. Wang Lin stood up and hesitantly picked up the stone bead. Upon closer inspection, he noticed that it had changed. The number of clouds on it had increased to 7. The scene before had caused his curiosity for the bead to increase, but also instilled a bit of fear into him. If he hadn't woken up in time, Jiang Hu would have been frozen to death. As to why he himself wasn't affected, Wang Lin could only guess that it was because he drank a lot of water that had the dew from the bead mixed in. However, Wang Lin was very curious about what the clouds on the stone bead do. But he eliminated the idea of going outside and letting the bead absorb more water. He was afraid the scene would cause everyone to notice. After hesitating for a while, he carefully put the bead back into his pocket. Not long after, dawn came and as Wang Lin was about to leave to do his chore when Jiang Hu jumped out of bed screaming, "Water! Water! The thirst is killing me." Chapter 15, Suspicion. Jiang Hu ran to the table in a daze. He tried to pour a cup of water from the container for a long time, but not a single drop came out. He rubbed his eyes and saw the bedding was crumpled into a ball. Then he stared at Wang Lin and said, "Wang Lin, when did you come back?" Did a ghost do this?" Wang Lin smiled, then he opened the door and said, "I don't know. When I got back, it was already like this. Why don't you try asking the other disciples? However, if this gets to the elders, you would have to go through the trouble of explaining this and possibly get interrogated by them." Jiang Hu shook his head, and said, "Forget it, I won't ask. If I get questioned by the elders, it would be hard to avoid punishment." Wang Lin didn't mind him and walked out the door. It was still raining outside, so he quickened his pace, afraid that the bead would cause some disturbance in the rain. He took a deserted path to the eastern gate. All the water that fell on him was absorbed by the bead, and he was afraid someone would notice. At first he wanted to hide it in his room, but then decided it was safer to hide it outside. Wang Lin went to one of the places that he had previously hid a gold containing dew. It was very early in the morning and not many people had awakened yet. He made sure no one followed him before burying the stone bead there. After that, he let out a sigh. He intended to wait for the rain to stop, then come back to take his treasure back. Wang Lin left very cautiously, making sure no one else was around, and made his way to the chore house. When he got there, he was just about to pick up a bucket when the weasel-faced yellow-clothed disciple came out. Disciple Lu was a bit startled when he saw Wang Lin, but quickly changed his expression to one full of enthusiasm as he rushed forward to snatch the bucket from Wang Lin's grasp. He said, "If it isn't Brother Wang. How was your trip home? Are your parents doing well? Your senior has missed you on these days you were gone." Wang Lin was stunned. He was very familiar with that face. It was exactly same face his relatives had at the party, but Wang Lin wasn't sure what Disciple Lu was trying to do. "Brother Lu, my parents are doing well. You don't need to worry," Wang Lin carefully replied, as he wasn't sure what Lu was up to. Disciple Lu warmly said, as he puffed his chest, "Brother, from now on you don't have to wake up so early. Your big brother was joking with you, telling you to fill 10 vats a day, but you went and seriously believed me. From now on, you only need to fill 1 vat a day. Even if you don't finish in time, you can go eat when food is served. If anyone gives you any trouble, just tell your big brother." Wang Lin's face changed color. He hesitantly asked, "Big brother, is there some matter you wish for me to attend to?" Disciple Lu's face was full of discontent, and pretended to be angry. "Little brother, How could you be so cold with your big brother? You are my little brother, naturally I should care for you. In the future, your issues are my issues. As for these chores, just do some work to say you worked. In the end, if you do good or bad is just my opinion. Since it's raining today you don't need to work. That's right, elder son came looking for you a few days ago. Now that you're back, it's best to go check in with him. He finished speaking and watched Wang Lin's reaction carefully. Wang Lin muttered to himself and kept from laughing out loud. In his heart, he had guessed more than half the story after listening to the disciple Lu. Elder son must have come looking for him after he left, and disciple Lu must be afraid of any grudge between them. That's why he is so friendly today. He didn't bother to point out the misunderstanding, and imitated what disciple Lu did when they first met and snorted. Disciple Lu's heart skipped when he saw Wang Lin's expression. This confirmed his own suspicion. This trash really was living the dream, to be able to get the attention of an elder. Otherwise, he wouldn't be so arrogant. This kid looked like one that would hold a grudge. He thought to himself, he will definitely take revenge on me later. Disciple Lu had been an honorary disciple for 13 years, and had spent 6 years at the Chor house. He had never before seen an elder seeking out an honorary disciple personally. It was already a rare event for an inner disciple to be sent by an elder. It wasn't that he hadn't considered the fact that Wang Lin had offended the elder, but it was only his speculation. However, he wasn't sure. It wouldn't be an issue if he was right, but he was scared of what would happen if he was wrong. He had been in the Heng Yue sect for many years, and knew exactly how insignificant he was. Thinking of this, he gritted his teeth and took out a piece of yellow paper, then handed it to Wang Lin. Little brother, when senior brother saw you last month, I ignored you. This is just a little gift not worth anything. You have to accept it. If you don't. Before Lai could finish, Wang Lin had already grabbed the yellow paper. When he saw it earlier he noticed it was the immortal talisman used when honorary disciples go home. Thank you senior brother. This little brother doesn't want to be arrogant, but elder is waiting for me. We will have to catch up next time. Wang Lin said while chuckling. Brother Lu was a bit envious as he nodded. The elder is more important, little brother should go quickly. Wang Lin was calm on the surface, but on the inside, he had many doubts about elder son. Why did he personally come looking for him? Wang Lin leisurely walked to the courtyard with these questions in his head. He had gone thoroughly analyze the situation, but in the end, he couldn't come to a conclusion. Could he have found out about the stone beat? Wang Lin thought. He pondered the question for a bit. He didn't have the ability to bribe the elder, and if he didn't go, he would offend the elder, so he might as well pretend he didn't know anything. Since the bead was not on him, he stopped thinking about it and walked forward. Not long after he arrived at the courtyard and announced his presence, the same youth in white appeared and was surprised. He quipped, "What, you have to visit home again?" Wang Lin raised his brow. Right before he was about to speak, elder son's voice came from within the courtyard. "Quickly, bring him here." Without delay. The disciple in white's mouth twitched. He gave Wang Lin a thoughtful look, then headed back into the courtyard. Wang Lin followed silently. After arriving at elder son's residence, the youth in white left. Before leaving, he shot Wang Lin a questioning look. Wang Lin was a bit nervous as he pushed open the gate and entered. The moment he entered, he saw an old man coming out from a room in the garden. The old man's face was full of wrinkles, his eyes bright, and he scanned Wang Lin with a cool look.